Welcome to Peak Personalities. This is a series we'll be doing bi-weekly with me and Nathan. The concept will be going by one series at a time, talking about some of our favorite moments, about a variety of characters, and for now, we're covering Bleach. So we're going to start off with my boy, the wildest, in-your-face, most upfront, misleading personality. His name is White. His name comes from the irony of his pure white soul in contrast to his black armor. This highlights the duality of his interactions with Ichigo in the story, his brash aggression contrasted by his thoughtful, protective gestures. The first thing I want to talk about is I think his first scene is when Ichigo fights Renji. Ichigo randomly dials the fuck in and then starts beating his ass. I'm pretty sure that's like White.
Doesn't his mask, no, his mask forms. Doesn't his mask protect him? No. Or is that when his first interaction with Byakuya, his like second interaction with Byakuya?
He doesn't have a mask in this fight. I think it's because it was like his first interaction with Byakuya when like they're threatening to take Rukia away. I think because Ichigo's like borrowing her powers instead of his own, it just manifests into like an increased power. He has like a really huge smile. He speed blitzes Renji. He is very cocky, and Ichigo is usually not cocky. Like he says, like, "What's wrong, Renji? You got slow all of a sudden." And he's like, "I'm pretty sure I can take you apart." And like these aren't things Ichigo usually says.
Yeah, no, that is not. I mean, when White definitely takes over, his personality definitely flourishes through Ichigo pretty well, and that's probably probably one of his biggest like aspects about him is, and why everyone likes him is because he's kind of like the cooler Ichigo, or he's a very opposite contrast to Ichigo.
Another moment that I think highlights their early interactions is when Ichigo gets his Shinigami powers from Urahara. The first thing he comes out with is his Shihakusho and a hollow mask. And the first thing Ichigo does is he breaks off that mask, which shows their relationship to come, where he's trying to deny that part of himself. We're going to go to pivotal moments. So, plot implications. I think one of the most important things he does is shape Ichigo's mindset and training him and demonstrating a more complicated view, because Ichigo for most of the story believes this falsehood that like hollows are bad and he needs to suppress that part of him. But White is an example of a hollow with a true agenda and a hidden agenda. His true agenda lies in like bolstering Ichigo and trying to make him the strongest he can be, while his hidden agenda is being an over-the-top brash villain for Ichigo and to be a challenge he has to overcome so Ichigo can be his strongest self. What are some things you think White really changes for his story?
Other than being a total badass, I mean, well, for one of my favorite things, I honestly I still recall, like I still watch every now and so often, is very early on in Bleach before we had the Thousand Year Blood War arc and we actually knew who White actually was, especially Ichigo. Is we had this mindset he was this inner demon that was just trying to take over Ichigo. And speaking of pivotal moments, one of my ones that I recall the most is obviously the fight against Byakuya. And the minute White takes over, and this is what really hooked me on him. When after the Thousand Year Blood War, and I rewatched and reread Bleach, the first thing he mentions to Ichigo is he tells him exactly why he felt like Ichigo recalled his bones felt like he was crumbling, and then White makes it very apparent that like he said you're crumbling over your own spiritual pressure is crumbling, it like literally shattering your bones and it's creaking. And then he literally demonstrates to Ichigo how you should use quote Bankai, but how he should use the Bankai. And that's like probably the biggest impact like White had for me and on the story and like his going forward is that he's always trying to teach Ichigo, even though it may come out as senile and sometimes sadistic of how his methods are. But I think he got the job done and definitely shaped Ichigo up a little bit.
Bro, that fight is so crazy because it's like that's Ichigo's potential when he does more training, is the contrast of him being on like death's door and White just completely demolishing Byakuya
It was a total flip. It was
is
like
so nuts to
it was
me.
real. It was a complete flip. Like we were getting like typical like shonen moment there where you know like our main pro tag is gonna like have like a last minute finishing move or something to take the win. And Ichigo was not in that stage at all. He was literally not going to make it through. And then White just takes over, and it turns into a completely jump up a fight. That's just Bleach fights in general, though. But he just completely flipped the gates, especially on like Byakuya is not like a low ranking captain. He is very powerful, and he just came in and made him look.
He's mid tier at worst.
Yeah, exactly. And White came in that. I mean, this more tests more to Ichigo's power, but White just comes in and takes Ichigo, who was struggling, and makes Byakuya look like a total chump.
What's funny about that fight is I like rewritten the ending of that fight in my head
Mm.
with like White ending it. But actually, it's a really big moment for Ichigo where he pulls off the mask, and then Byakuya and Ichigo kind of just talk about that moment with the hollow. He's like, "Yeah, I have no clue what that was." And they're like, "Okay, you want to finish this?" And you just do like the dramatic one-hit move, and you wonder which one of them's gonna fall 1st.
Mm-hmm. That,
But
that was honestly that part of the fight was kind of funny because Ichigo was like, "Oh yeah, like sometimes the demon comes out and takes over. It's okay, don't worry about it. Here, let's let's get back to what we're doing." And Byakuya's giving him the most like insane look, like what was that? Which that was probably like that was probably like that was honestly the end of the climax of the fight. But well, they have their little one off.
for a strong character moment, I think it just has to be White's the king in the horse speech.
Oh, that's the best one.
It seems so like over the top Disney villain esque, where like you don't even know if what he says has a point, and he just talks about the difference between the king and a horse he rides. Is it strength? They're exactly the same. Who decides who leads them into battle, and then who will dominate the other? And he just says killer instinct. It's like I was interested, but now you've lost me. And then he goes on to mention that Ichigo fights with a sheathed sword and like he doesn't want to dominate or crush his opponents. Does Ichigo really need that to defeat his opponents? And then that's like the segue into the Ronkar arc where people
Mm-hmm.
like Grimjow and Rukiora, they aren't holding their punches at all.
No, and there's like no hesitation you can have. I mean, especially against Ukiora, because he's very brutal and he makes it very clear in their fight that he's like outclassing Ichigo, like very early on. And Ichigo needed that grounding from White because I think White like made it like was very like he knew Ichigo, like he knows Ichigo because he is at we know now he's his Zanpakuto spirit and they are one. So he knows when someone's spirit is weak, and he sensed that Ichigo probably had that weakness or that timidness to him. And he's like, "You need to do something about this, or we're gonna die." That's that. I love that freaking speech, and I like that moment for Ichigo because like he looked at White as this demon, but again, he was just teaching him. And again, he was he does it in a very way of like, "I'm gonna take you over," but I think that's just his hollow spirit just talking there.
That last part of the speech, he says, "You will never kill me. I refuse to play horse for a king who is weaker than me. I'll crush you and become king myself." And I think this really highlights a misdirection that he's willing to lead Ichigo just to be a opposing force for Ichigo to grow to defeat.
I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't be opposed to a whole like honestly, I wouldn't be opposed to a whole arc where White just took over and just completely just took over the show. I wouldn't, especially the English dub. His voice actor, I don't know his name, but that dude goaded, and he absolutely slays the voice acting.
I love White in the dub and the sub.
They're both good because both of the voice, but I'm a sucker for the dub. That dude absolutely nailed the craziness and insanity and the madness that is White, but he's also very cunning and arrogant.
My moment for biggest surprise when it comes to White is the true origin and everything but the rain. To know his creation was Aizen's doing, and he's like been with Ichigo since birth, and it's been a great turning point in like viewers' minds as well as Ichigo to recontextualize his bizarre behavior, come to the true conclusion that White's been trying to build Ichigo up to be as strong as possible so he doesn't die.
Speaking on that, I don't know if Kubo ever clarified this. I don't know if White, the minute he became, Ichigo's Zanpakuto spirit, if his intentions are always to train Ichigo, or like we got his org kind of just like showed up.
White before, like in the Everything But the Rain arc, it's really hard to know if he has a conscious or that manifested after bonding with like
Yeah,
Ichigo.
that's where I think the theories come in. And I think he did, like, his conscience did develop, or maybe what would be a normal spirit the minute you get Zanpakuto fused. And then, obviously the blade is Ichigo. This is just a hollow form of Ichigo that's just a bit crazy a bit crazy.
White is kind of sad to be the villain in Ichigo's eyes.
Oh yeah. It's
One of the first times he manifests when he's helping Old Man Zangetsu train Ichigo in that Kenpachi like inner mind
mhm.
battle, there's a reflection on the Zanpakuto with him frowning.
Oh yeah.
And like people always remember that like Old Man Zangetsu has that great speech about it's so sad to be the only being in this realm where it rains and you have no one to connect to, and like that's also true for
Mhm.
White.
And that's also Ichigo. I mean, I don't know if White did that. I mean, White could have. I mean, actually, now I think about it, Ichigo was pretty airheaded about. I mean, I don't blame him. He was, when you have a demon that takes over and constantly tells you he's gonna kill you or take over your body, it's probably doesn't give "I'm yours" on Pakuto spirit often. But White makes it very clear to Ichigo actually multiple times in the story that he screams like in his speech with him. He tells him, "I am Zangetsu," and Ichigo's like, "Where's old man at?" And like White's literally telling him to his face, "I am Zangetsu." It's kind of funny. It's like he's crying out to Ichigo, like trying to get him to realize it, and Ichigo's just like, "No way, you wouldn't be," because old man Zangetsu was more of a, I guess, traditional teacher, being his Quincy powers manifested.
I think White's peak moment has to be when the his ending line of the horse speech is, "If you really want to control my powers until we next meet, make sure you don't get killed." And then Ichigo gets killed because he's the main character in a
Of course.
shonen. And then White rises from the sand, towering over Rukiora, stoic, voiceless, but not roarless. And then literally each move Rukiora disrespectfully did to Ichigo, White does back to Ukiura to fuck with him. So he grabs him by the face and grinds his skin into the pillars of Las Noches. He grabs Ukiura's Lancer del Rampago
Hmm.
attack and then shatters it. And he also, like, Rukiura taunts Ichigo to try Getsuga Tensho. And now Rukiura has the entire scene flipped where he's asking White to do a Zero to the face because he knows he can't win and he just wants it to end.
You know, I don't know because White didn't talk during that fight. I mean, obviously he takes over, but he's like, it's funny because like that fight in particular, when White took, because usually when White takes over, you'll see, he has this crazy laugh.
He
Yeah, he
usually
usually talks.
talks.
That one, it was like a very primal form of White. But we know that, especially when Ichigo goes in his inner world, when he goes into the Dangai, that White can, put that mask on and that look, and he can talk.
Well, actually, I do have an interesting tidbit about this.
Okay, but
So, you know how after traditionally Ichigo's hollow mask is
mhm,
red, but after the fight here with Rukiora, Ichigo is very terrified of his hollow side because White stabbed
mhm,
Urdu, and Ichigo's hollow mask instead has two black stripes. And then on Club Outside, Kubo mentioned that if Ichigo is able to manifest his true hollowification mask after the Rukiora fight, he would have donned that same mask that you saw against Rukiora.
mhm.
And that does kind of show up at the end of the series, the Horn of Salvation.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, he does get. Well, he doesn't get a mask. He just gets the Horn of Salvation.
He gets
Yeah,
the
yeah. He gets
horn,
the.
but it's the same style of horn that you
Do
saw
you
in the
think he should have
mask.
got his? You think he should have kept the mask? As a side note.
I don't think it was in his choice. I'm of the belief that because Fullbring is a hollow based
Hmm.
ability, that when he mastered his Fullbring, when he later regained his Shinigami power is the reason why his outfit changes and he has like the X's that represents a combat pass he had, and that's a fusing of his Hollow and his Soul Reaper powers. I don't think there is a mask at that point.
Yeah, I don't know if it was ever explained that the Ichigo can technically still manifest a mask or not after the Fullbring arc.
I'm pretty sure it's up in the air, but I think he can.
Yeah, he to be fair, he doesn't need to at that point in the story. But yeah, no, because we that was the last time. Don't think we. I can't remember the last time Ichigo. I think Ichigo's last time he pops up the mask.
I think it's against Gin.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. I thought the Aizen would be the last one. But yeah, no, I think it was Geen before he died. Rest in peace, Geen. Shout out to all the Geen fans.
My conclusion point, my favorite thing about White is his upfront, quick, and overwhelming fighting style. There's a lot of characters in Bleach who love to fight, but are still professionally certified yappers, like Kenpachi and Unohana.
Yeah.
White only talks when he's trying to train Ichigo, and aside from that, he's just out for business.
What's your favorite part of his fighting style?
My favorite what?
What like his fighting style? Because you said he's very like abrupt. He gets to the point. He's not much of a yapper. So what's your favorite part of his fighting style? Like for me, it's when I like especially when he has the traditional Shikai and he's spins it on a rope and he does very unique like attacking styles against Ichigo.
I always love how he spun Zangetsu against Ichigo.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the best demonstration of like his fighting style is when he fights Rukiora, and also that early encounter against Renji.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like there's no room for either of them to breathe and like try to recollect their thoughts. It's just he's constantly within swiping distance and he's going for it.
And that's what I love about. And I think I don't. I think was this a movie or was it filler with that? Was his name Masamune? Was that filler?
I'm gonna have to look up that name real quick.
Because there's a fight with where White faces. He's like the I
Oh,
forgot what his name.
Muramasa.
Muramasa. Yeah, that's his
Oh
name.
my
Yeah,
god, dude, that filler fight is actually
that
so good.
that's like the one filler I wish I would have never skipped because they look so good. It's I should probably just watch the episode.
Are there any closing things? Anything you really love about White that you want to throw out there?
Other than honestly, no, I'm gonna give. We've been hyping him up so much. I am gonna throw some shade at Kubo here. I'm really sad White did not get any speech, talk, or anything that Thousand Year Blood War arc. I think that was totally a miss. And I hope the anime does something about it.
I think I definitely agree with that. The other thing that I think is a complete miss is we've seen so many reflections of Ichigo's inner world at like different states of his life. Like at the
Mm-hmm.
start of the show, you have the skyscrapers, and it seems like there's no water. And later you revisit it, and it rains, and you revisit it again, and instead of skyscrapers, it's literally Karakura Town, and it's completely washed out with water. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really weird that we don't see Ichigo's inner world with Old Man Zangetsu and White after it Blade is Me. I think it would have been really a big moment if like you watch shatters his sword and then he at least tries to meditate and re-enter his world and just see the state of it.
Yeah, or even look at, or at least have a moment where White, or even if you want to throw his, both the spirits in him, talking to him, just so that he knows that that is him and that he can have confidence. Because that was a really good building moment right there for Ichigo. I mean, it was kind of last minute, but Kubo was kind of in a rush, I guess.
I thought it was so weird in the Blade is Me when they show a panel of art for White and he doesn't even say like hi. It's just a photo of him.
No, this is a theory though, because we know that Ichigo can choose if he wants the dual swords or if he just wants the normal Shikai. What do you think White would rock with?
Hmm. I feel like he would probably do the great sword.
Yeah, I think he still would stick with the great because I think he just likes how the unpredictability of the way he uses it.
I feel like he would start off with a great sword and then he would just like randomly swap to dual sword to fuck with people.
He probably, I could just see him just swinging like the little, uh, I'm gonna call it it's not a butcher's knife. It's
It's
the
almost like a dagger.
Yeah, it's like they have like a small little. I forgot what it's called. It's literally in Call of Duty too. I think not a commando knife. I could just see him just chucking that or using the other sword just to smack it, and then he just switches swords, and then he's just I could just see him going crazy with like if Ichigo can swap on like on command, which if he can, that would be kind of busted.
You know, that's one thing I thought
Mm.
about when White takes over against Rukiora. The first thing he does is like call the sword to
Yeah,
him.
he has the Jedi moment where he
It's like, can other people do that, or is that because he's a Zanpakuto spirit and he's like literally fused with the blade?
I want to know why Ichigo doesn't do that though. I don't. I totally think it was mostly theatrics, but I think I go. My headcanon is that White just knows how to do that because he's a Zanpakuto spirit, and Ichigo just wasn't paying because I feel like that's like very handy that you can just call the blade to you.
Yeah, you could literally go knife throwing with Ichigo's small sword and then call it back.
That's literally how that's literally what I was thinking that he could do if he were to do both swords. Because that's what made me think of that. Honestly, was that moment. I'm like, he did just call the sword to him and just went full Jedi moment. But that's still one of that's still another one of the great fights is when White takes over. I really wish he would have talked. I mean, I guess it's supposed to show that it's scary and terrifying side of Ichigo, especially when White does take over. But
I think the more scary thing is Unohana hypes up Ichigo's power. He's like, yeah, I have half a Shihakusho. This isn't even my full power. So White was fighting with like nerfed Shihakusho and demolished Ukiora.
I mean, well, if you look at his whole outfit, he just basically had legs. Like, no, I think he had like a pant leg and another one was cut off. Call that like a third of or a quarter of Ichigo's power or full power, and he is still wiping the floor with them. But what is it like? I wonder. Like that's what I'm saying. I feel like this should have been a 1,000 year blood war arc thing. I feel like Ichigo should have had a little mini training arc or something with White. Be like, all right, now you know your true Bankai. Now let's see if you really can. Let's see what you really can do.
They really could have fused that with the path that Ichibei has him walk.
Hmm.
They really could have just thrown in a sword training moment around there or before.
Yeah, I think he should have just had at least one moment with White. And I also would have liked to see White like for Old Man Zangetsu because that is his Quincy spirit. I wish White would have had like more disdain for it because we know Hollows and Quincy's.
You want beef between his sword selves?
Yeah, yeah, just to show that there's turmoil and that to hone in on I am even though I'm his Zanpakuto spirit, I'm still a Hollow and I don't like Quincy's. Right? Like I would have liked that word because they fuse, and that's what I don't
Well,
understand.
maybe White chooses not to identify like that,
Yeah,
Nathan.
he probably doesn't, but I mean, like we've seen the battle of the Hollows and the Quincy's before, so and then also they fuse too. That's another thing when and then the Don guy they literally fuse together, and it's like how does that happen?
Yeah, that is such a weird moment because not only does Ichigo have a unique sword variation for Bankai, they're still kind of separate and they can fuse together.
Not only that, they're antagonist spirits too. They're not like Quincy powers and Hollow powers often reject each other.
I think Ichigo's the only hybrid of Hollow and Quincy.
Well, he's a mix of literally everything.
Well, I'm still waiting for the arc of Ichigo being a witch.
I don't think Kubo will dive into. Oh no, Ichigo. Honestly, I think Kubo was like, all right, I'm gonna give him literally everything. Like if Ichigo was in Naruto, he would be Sharingan. He'd be part Uzumaki clan, Senju clan, somehow be an Uchiha, and then also be part of the Hyuga clan. Oh my gosh! But hey, that's all I got. All right. Well, do you have a closing outro?
Yeah, boy. I mean, we'll be doing this bi-weekly, and then Nathan will pick the next character we talk about, so I'll be completely surprised.
I think it's gonna be a good one.
I hope so. White's my number one.
Yeah, White was a good one. I'm glad you picked White because I'm like, if he picks some like
Dude,
side character like the dude with the
who are
afro,
you worried about me
the
picking?
dude with the afro, I literally if you picked him, I told you.
Oh, what is his name? He's such a joke character.
Yeah, that's what I was like. If no one picks him, I'm totally screwed. I'm like, I'll be looking up YouTube videos on the spot.
Dude, he's such a bad joke character.